It's a good day today. For the past 2 years, I've been wanting to start a YouTube channel, but I don't know. I've been procrastinating about it for like a long time, deciding on what kind of gear I need, what kind of microphone I need, lighting systems. I was overthinking the process. So finally this year I decided that I was going to start my YouTube channel. And even with that, when I was thinking of starting, I was still overthinking. And I just said, let me just film this video and just talk about what I want to talk about. So since I was, let me say, 17, I've been wanting to become, let me say, a businessman. Now we call it entrepreneur, but I would say a businessman because for my family, we used to do a lot of businesses. Even though it wasn't big scale, it was still in the blood, We were doing a little back and forth transactions with people that could entitle as a business, right? So I decided that at the age of 19, I would start my self-improvement, business owner, entrepreneur journey. But I've always wanted to share my journey with people because I feel like there are many people out there that related to what was going on. There are many people out there who are starting their journey like me and have a lot of things they wish they could relate to. But I was like, I don't want to put my business, I don't want to put my stuff out there publicly. So I was always in the shadows, grinding in the shadows, improving myself in the shadows. So I was like, this year, I'm going to actually start sharing my journey publicly. So across those 2 years, I've learned a lot of things, came in touch with a lot of people, and I've learned a lot of stuff that could take me to the next level. And I felt like, in this first video, I'm going to share some of those things, So in this video, I'm going to talk about the 4 books that took me to the next level of my, I wouldn't say career, but it took me from point A to point B, That's the definition of a level from one point to another. So in these books, in these 4 books, I'm going to divide them into different categories, mindset, wealth, health, and habits. Yes, habits. So let's get into it. The first book is a book about mindset. It talks about, before I even talk about what the book is about, let me just tell you the title. The title is called Mindset by Dweck. It's a very fascinating book, on how mindset works and the psychology of success. But there's this story. There was this boy who believed he wasn't just smart enough, and every time he failed, it just confirmed the fact that he wasn't smart enough. And one day he stumbled upon a quote that said there are 2 types of mindset: fixed and growth. One says this is all you can ever be. The other says, the other says you can change if you are willing to try, And that idea changed the way he looked at things differently, And that's what this book talks about. It talks about the 2 types of mindset, fixed and growth. And Dweck talks about how successful people are not They are not born different, you know. They just believe they are different, you know. They just believe they are different. So it all comes from a perspective of like believing that if you're willing to try, you become better, you know. So like that's what the book is all about. The two types of mindset and how you can use them to elevate your way to success. Believing you can do it is different, you know. Like that's the first step. Believing you can do it, that's the first step. But the way you live your everyday life in motion, that's what like differentiates potential from, you know, how would I say, from greatness. So like that's where the next book comes in, you know. The next book talks about habits. You know, mindset is the engine, but you know, like habit is what keeps you going. Do you understand? So the next book I'm going to talk about is High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard. So Brendon is a guy who did a research about the most successful people in the world and how they live their life and what made them who they are today. And he looked at all the things that they had in common, you know, after his research. And he found 6 things that took them to the next level. Do you understand me? You know, many people want to be successful, but most people don't ask, what do successful people like do differently? So that's where this book comes in, habits. You know, there was this man that always worked non-stop. He was the hardest worker, but he felt like he was stuck. He was always in a loop. And he asked his mentor, what should I do? Like, why am I always stuck? But I'm always working hard. I'm always at it, like putting in the grit. So his mentor said, it's not about working hard, it's about working like the top 1%. So this is what the whole thing is about. This is what the whole book is about. It's about how the most successful people do things differently. So Brendon talks about 6 different things in the book that successful people do differently. Do you understand? And one of the things he talks about in his book that actually changed my perspective on things was seeking clarity, like knowing what you want, knowing who you are, what matters to you, and knowing what you don't want in your life. You know, most people look at the things they want in life, but they don't actually sit down to be like, what are the things I do not want in my life, you know? So seeking clarity was one of the things I learned from his book that actually changed my perspective on things. But you know, Brendon realized something. You can win at life, but you be failing at like living. And that's where the next book comes in, you know. You can win so much at doing something, but you not last long. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's where the next book comes in. Health is Wealth. The Blue Zones by a man named Buettner. He did a research about people and how they lived in countries whereby people live more than 100 years consistently, and he writes down everything these people do and the way they eat, the way they talk, the way they live. And he realized 3 things. They lived with purpose, they had connectivity with one another, and they were happy. And he explored these 3 things and he talks about it in his book. You see, high performance habits is about speed. But you see, living in the blue zones, yo, what's it do for my background? So you see, high performance habits is like climbing a mountain. The blue zone book is like enjoying the view on the top of the mountain. So the blue zone book by Buettner, it talks about Dan traveling to places where people lived over like 100 years consistently. And he found out that these people, like this group of people, they lived a very different life, you know. They were happy, they lived with purpose, and they had connectivity with like people, you know. It's not like today's modern generation whereby a lot of people are always at home. You know, they're not really connected to society like that. So he talks about 9 things which he called the power of 9. And one of the things he talked about that I really feel like people should take more seriously is rest. People don't actually take rest seriously. You need to, I'm not saying rest in terms of like sleep, but you need to calm down and move in life like smoothly. These people that lived over like 100 years consistently, they were not rich for real. They were not like billionaires or millionaires. They just lived with purpose, you know. And that's where the next book comes in. It talks about clarity, purpose, freedom, self-awareness. It basically talks about the things that compound to wealth. So how would you be able to live Asian type of lifestyle but still have the modern touch to be able to acquire the world you want to acquire? And the next book is titled The Almanack of Naval. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but it's in Naval, Ravikant. Yeah, Naval Ravikant. And he talks about wealth in a very different perspective, like in a way where it sounds more like freedom. From my perspective, I feel like it's a very great book in terms of building your mindset towards wealth, because it teaches you a lot of stuff. I would say that's one book people should go and actually look into. Yeah, it's a very great book. And that book has taught me a lot of things that I wouldn't even actually think of when it came to wealth. It was a very fascinating book. I think if you want to move to point A to point B in your life, these are the 4 books you should look into. You know, these are very great books. These are like suggestions. You don't actually have to take it like compulsory to, you know, read these books for your life to actually change, you know. There's different materials that change people's life, and these are the materials that actually changed my life from point A to point B. But what I would say is this: the main principle of this video is just read. Read. Like a lot of people can't sit down for an hour and just read. Just read, like broaden your mind, because your mind is a very powerful resource. You need to take hold and take control of it. So yeah, that's the main principle of this video. Like, just read. So I've given out the 4 books that took me from point A to point B. Yep. Thank you for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed it. In the Almanack of Naval Ravikant, he was like, inspiration is perishable, so you have to act on it like immediately. That's why in this last part, I'm giving out all the 4 books that changed my life from point A to point B. Check the link in my bio. You find all these books for free. You don't have to pay anything.